Welcome to the show. A very, very good morning. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now, I'm very, very excited to be here because it is actually a Wednesday. I have to say, time has passed by really fast. And honestly, it's just the fact that time passed by so fast that makes you aware of the fact that this year is flying. Like it is literally flying because time is passing by so, so fast. So, like I said, it is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now you're tuned into the sunrise, and we do have a lot of things to be talking about. We do have a lot of interesting things to be talking about. So make sure you stay tuned because, like I said, we have a variety of topics. We have health, we have, science, technology, entertainment, gossip, whatever it is that you want to hear. Don't worry because right here on Relax Radio, we have it all. Okay. So make sure you stay tuned because I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. And then after that, there'll be so much of more amazing people who are so interesting as well to keep you company. So make sure you stay tuned. Right, like I said, it is Wednesday. It's the middle of the week, and I have to say, time just flies. Literally, quite literally, it just flies. So, like I said, I'm very excited to be here. And while we're at it, I also want to quickly remind you that you can go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way, you can actually, make sure you're a part of this show. You can always make sure you're updated, you're informed, and you know about everything that is happening right here on Relax Radio. Okay, so make sure you go follow that, and also make sure to follow our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. That means you can actually listen to us from your from whatever device it is that you want to listen to us from, right? Regardless of whether it's iOS or Android or whatever other device it is, you can always be a part of the conversation if you download our app. Okay, so make sure you do that because that also means you can listen into our conversations from wherever in the world you are, and regardless of whatever time it is, that means you can listen to our conversation. So make sure you do that. And I also want to tell you that if you have any thoughts, any opinions that you want to share with us, even your experiences, make sure you text me on 078 because that way you can make sure, everyone who's listening in knows about your experience. Everyone who's listening in can share, and you can share your experience with everyone who's listening in as well. And that is exciting, okay? Because, when you're human, when you're all about making friends, especially in the middle of a pandemic, you want to share your experience, right? You want to share your thoughts and feelings with everyone who's listening in because you know that that way you can make sure that they will relate to you, that you can relate to them as well. So make sure you text me because I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts and your opinions about everything that is happening. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually get into a very, very important conversation, which is about multitasking. Let's be honest, we've all been there and we've all done that as well, right? We've all must multitask, especially if anything, we've multitasked more than ever before in the middle of this pandemic, because simply because of the fact that we have had to multitask and make sure we did everything that we were supposed to do. So sometimes when it comes to multitasking, sometimes when it comes to making this decision, you have absolutely no choice. Sometimes you have to multitask because there's so many different things that you as a person need to complete, regardless of whether it's at your job or it's at home. There are so many different tasks that we all have to complete, right? So because of that, sometimes we have to multitask. So we will be talking about multitasking, whether it's helpful or whether multitasking is in fact a menace or if it is a talent, and if it's helpful or disadvantageous. And I do have a lot of research and statistics to prove whether it's good or bad. And what's best is I also have some little tips that will help you to break away from multitasking too much. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned because you can find out all of that right here on the sunrise with me, Sarah. So let's get into that conversation then. And if before we get into that conversation, actually I want to quickly remind you once again that you can text me on 078 and share your thoughts and opinions with me. I know you can relate to multitasking because we've all been there and we've done that. So make sure you Make sure you do that. Now, getting into this conversation, we, very simply put, multitasking is doing multiple tasks simultaneously, right? We all know that, and we've been there as well. So in an era of mass distraction, we have no choice but to actually keep juggling every aspect of our lives. We have so many different things going on in our lives. We have jobs, you have to, do the household chores. Sometimes if you have children, you have to look after children. If you're taking care of your family, you have to do that. So, like I said, there are multiple things that we do in our lives. So, because we live in a world that is so competitive, because we are living in a world that is so, it's always about competition. It's about, who does most and who does it better. We obviously have a lot of responsibilities. We all have a lot of duties as well. So because of that, we have no choice but to multitask, and that is what it is. So what we can do though is stop romanticizing and heroizing this process, because as cool as it sounds to tell someone, oh, hey, I can multitask, it's probably not the best thing to do, because research has actually found that, when you're multitasking, you can't actually focus properly, and it really affects your brain and the way your brain functions. Now, make sure you stay tuned, because I will be getting into all of that. But before that, I want to just tell you a few stories. I want to make it as relatable as possible, because that's how we would want to listen to something, right? Now, how many times have you, and believe me, I'm guilty of this too, have you had, so many different tabs open on your computer? Because right now I have like 10 different tabs open on my computer as well, okay? And that is because sometimes we have to multitask. Sometimes, there are so many different things to complete at the end of the day that we have no choice but to multitask. So, for example, when I'm researching content for my show, when I'm researching things to tell you, when I'm looking up ways to make it relatable as much as possible, I have multiple different tabs open. And while I have so many different tabs open on my computer, I'm also checking out stuff on my phone, or I'm on a call, or sometimes I have siblings, so sometimes I need to look into their work and what they're doing and make sure they're okay as well. So while I am doing my work, I also have other responsibilities. I also have other things that I need to look into. And the thing is, when we're multitasking, there are different questions that we ask, or not that we ask, but after you're done multitasking, and if you're someone who likes to overanalyze and think, think about things way too much, like I do, you would, I mean, I don't know, but I have had multiple questions about multitasking. And so I thought, what, maybe I'll look up on it. And some of these questions I had were actually things like whether multitasking increases cortisol levels, or whether it reduces your IQ by almost the amount that is by the amount that your IQ reduces when you smoke marijuana. So obviously those were some of those questions I had. And believe me, I'm that kind of person who has questions about everything. One time I even googled why flamingos are pink, but that's a whole other conversation altogether. And sometimes, even though I search like so many different things, I also tend to forget everything that I read and like research that happens, because right now I can't remember why flamingos are pink. But that's a whole different conversation altogether, right? But when you do multitask, does it actually make you less productive or less empathetic? Because there is this IQ claim that is there, or there is this claim that says if you multitask, your IQ is going to reduce, or if you multitask, that you're going to be less productive. So we will be actually discussing all these claims. We'll be discussing the pros and cons of multitasking, what to do if you're multitasking too much, and everything. So make sure you stay tuned, okay? But getting back into this conversation, this IQ claim that is there actually comes from a 2005 study on technological distraction, okay, which found that participants distracted by calls or emails suffered from a 10-point IQ drop on average, okay? So the moment you're doing some work and someone calls you, or someone sends you an email and tells you to check up on it, then your IQ actually drops by 10 points, okay? And that is really, really, not scary, but it's quite, I don't know how to feel about it actually. Like, I like having a high IQ. Who doesn't, right? Obviously, it's something you can, flaunt, right? Hey, I have a high IQ, and I would absolutely love to flaunt that, right? Obviously, who wouldn't like to do that? But the thing is, when you get calls, when you're distracted, when you're focusing on something, your IQ tends to drop by 10 points. Now, this impaired productivity claim actually seems to derive from the 2009 Stanford University research, in which heavy multitaskers actually performed worse in a range of tasks. Now, I know it's all fun and games to boast about your multitasking abilities, how you're so good at it, and, basically about how you can do multiple tasks at the same time. However, when compared to people who focused on one task, and the other group of people were obviously multitaskers, it actually showed that they performed much much worse in a range of tasks. And I'll tell you why. Okay, but you've got to stay tuned for that, because there is this whole psychological process. There is a way it all works, and it's really really interesting. So I am in fact very very excited to tell you about it. But before we get into that, there are a few other things I want to talk about with you as well. Now, while we're at it, if there are any other things that you want to talk to me about as well, be it any questions you have, opinions, thoughts, questions, experience, whatever it is, make sure you text me on 078 and share it with me, because I would absolutely love it. I would absolutely love to share it with everyone who's listening in as well. Okay, now getting back into this conversation, a 2017 paper actually said that only one study found multitasking led to increased cortisol levels, but at least three show that it increased stress, anxiety, and fatigue. I know we've all been there, right? You always feel stressed out, or you feel very very tired after you've multitasked, and it makes sense because you're focusing on so many different things, and your brain, your focus isn't even focused on one thing. You don't necessarily focus on one thing, and you're focusing on multiple things, and because of that, it tends to get very draining because you're thinking of 100 different things in your head while doing something completely different, right? Now, this empathy claim that exists about how if you're a multitasker you're going to have less empathy is actually a stretch. But the University of Sussex, a study that was done by the University of Sussex actually showed that higher media multitaskers, concurrent who are basically concurrent consumers of multiple media forms, had less brain density in the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the region of your brain that's responsible for empathy, among other things. So that's as far as it goes. And that just goes to show, when you're multitasking, sometimes you can have less empathy because you have so many different things to do. And because you're multitasking, sometimes your brain density in certain parts of your brain can actually reduce. So that is, in fact, something very, very negative and very unhealthy as well. But make sure you stay tuned, because I will be back to talk to you more about multitasking, about everything else. But until then, make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're going to head into a small break.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday. And what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be, so that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country. To be fair, different countries have different tax laws. So different vehicles, but from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Like I said, we were talking about multitasking. We were talking about why it's so bad and what exactly are the effects of multitasking. And make sure you stay tuned into the conversation because we will be continuing to talk about all of those things because it's important in this day and age, especially given the fact that we all multitask so many we all multitask during the day. So many of us do that, right? And that's why it's important to have this conversation to make all of you aware of the detrimental effects of multitasking and how you can actually help yourself to get better, how you can make sure that you don't multitask and that you focus on what you're doing because it is affecting a lot of people, not just here in the United Kingdom, but also around the rest of the world as well. So make sure you stay tuned because we are having that conversation. Now, to get back into this, before we actually get back into this conversation, I want to quickly remind you that you can follow us on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can be a part of this conversation because you'll always be updated, you'll always be informed, and you can always engage with everything we're talking about and everything we are going to be saying. So make sure you do that. And also, while you're at it, make sure to download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, just to make sure it's accessible to all of you so that you can join into the conversation any time of the day in any part of the world. Okay, so make sure you download that as well because it's definitely going to help you. But while you're also at it, you can text me on 07852473 because that way you can definitely share your thoughts, your experiences, whatever it is that you want to share with us. You can do that as well. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually head back into that conversation because we were, in fact, having a very, very interesting conversation about multitasking. Right now, look, here's the thing, right? Earlier we were just talking about how multitasking can lead to the brain density changing and whatnot. But let's get into why we don't really need a journal citation to confirm that when you do lots of things at once, you become more stressed and lose focus. I've been there, and I do get very stressed out when I have to do multiple things at once. And I know I'm not the only one because you have this thought in your head. You're thinking to yourself, oh, okay, if I don't do this now, something's going to happen, something bad's going to happen, and I have to face the consequences of not completing my task. So we all have these thoughts, we've all been there, and we know that it can get very stressful. So because we have so many different things going on in our head, like I said, when you're multitasking, you're doing one thing, but you're thinking of 100 other things in your head. And when you're thinking of all the other 100 things that you're doing, um, that you need to do rather while you're doing something, it makes you stressed out because the only thought in your head is, will I be able to complete this? Will I be able to finish it? Am I going to get in trouble if I don't? So obviously, like I said, we don't need all these journal citations. We don't need scientific evidence to show us or even tell us that we get stressed and we lose focus because we ourselves have experienced it. And there's also the matter that this is in fact worsened by the fact that we have the whole internet in our pocket, right? We literally, we can search the entire internet on your phone, and it's that easy. That's as easy as it gets. So because we are constantly distracted by the fact by our phones and by the work that we have to do, and we're also thinking of 100 other things that we have to do, we tend to get very stressed out and lose focus. Now, we actually know we're cognitively fried, and perhaps we have never been more cognitively fried at any other point in our life. But and no one with any combination of carrying responsibilities, children, a job, a life, and even a smartphone has actually had the time to write King Lear, or even, elucidate the laws of motion and gravity in these times of a plague. But it is what it is, right? um Especially because we have been working from home, we have made a sort of virtue of our, fractured, stressful attempts to serve competing demands, right? Like I said, because there are so many competing demands in our jobs, in our lives, in all the other activities that we do, we have sort of made it into a virtue. The fact that we can multitask. Oh, like, if you can multitask, you would definitely think it would look good on your CV, because hey, I can multitask. And who I multitask, I will also, give all of my mental capabilities and capacities. I will sacrifice all of that just so I can multitask for you, right? That's essentially what's happening, where where how would I put it, we're intentionally contributing, sometimes unintentionally as well, we're contributing to changing our brain matter. Because when you're focusing on so many different things at once, what happens is, in different parts of your brain, the density actually reduces. Now, obviously, I don't need to get into this conversation and tell you why that's bad, right? We know that things are supposed to have a certain density, things are supposed to be a certain way because of its impacts on our body. So obviously, if the density of one part of our brain is reducing, then that just goes to show, rather, that it's really, really unhealthy. Right now, we've also had this unavoidable leaching of our personal lives into our professional ones over the past 18 months. And it has had its good points, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't had its bad points as well, right? Because we need to understand that, because we have been working from home, that very distinctive line that exists between work and life has actually disintegrated, because we are working from home. So we're in fact combining our work life and we're combining our home life, and we're doing it together, and then sort of, doing what we have to do. So that very distinctive line that actually existed back then doesn't exist at the moment. It doesn't exist right now, because of working from home, because of the pandemic, because all of these changes that we're currently going through. And it's actually very, very right to acknowledge that we're not single-minded productivity drones, right? Because we're not. And sometime back as well, we were talking about productivity, we were talking about whether 100% productivity exists and whatnot. And the truth of the matter is, not really, because we're human. We can't always be 100% productive. That's just not how we're wired. And even if we try to do that, even if, say, we were 100% productive, we would only be able to do that for a limited time period, and not necessarily the whole day, because we get tired. And the moment our productivity drops, if you're 100% productive in the first 2 or 3 hours, then the next hour, after the first 2 or 3 hours, you'll probably be only 65% productive, or even 45% productive. So obviously, when your productivity drops as well, when you're very, very productive at the beginning, then that's not good for yourself or your job either, right? Because when you're working, you need to sort of be productive, you need to get all of these tasks done and whatnot. So obviously, that's not helpful or useful for either you or me, right? And that's this whole other conversation about productivity. But getting back into multitasking, the whole purpose of multitasking is to be productive, right? And when we're trying to be so productive, when we're constantly placing this burden and we're pressurizing ourselves to to complete certain tasks, it does in fact get very, very stressful. So like I said, we need to acknowledge the fact that we're not single-minded productivity drones, but people who actually look after other people. We take care of children with like small sticky fingers, and they are and these fingers actually quite often reach for our keyboards. They love pressing buttons. And we have our pets who are always running around and doing weird stuff while we're on Zoom calls, especially cats. And I have seen so many Instagram videos as well about how cats are just in their whole in their own world while they're on a Zoom call, and I think that's just how cats are. But you know what I mean, right? And we have so many different things to do in our lives as well, so we obviously are not single-minded productivity drones. And the pandemic has actually also compounded our multitasking problem, and what's even worse is that it has in fact normalized it, and it has in fact glorified it, even in this kind of stereoidal and heroic multitasking, right? They always think it's such a heroic thing to do. Oh, you can multitask. Oh, that's great. That's like the most amazing talent someone could have, which is really not true. Multitasking is in fact quite unhealthy. It's not really helpful as well, because even though we try to convince ourselves that it is, even though we try to tell ourselves, hey, you know what, maybe I am productive, that's really not the case, because research itself has found, and we ourselves have felt this as well, no matter how many tasks you try to complete within a specific time period, sometimes you can never get any of those tasks done, right? Now, one time when I was back in school, I had to organize this event, right? And obviously organizing an event alone meant that I had to think of everything, and the reason I had to do it alone was simply because the rest of my committee was quite useless. And I think a lot of us can relate to this as well. It's like those memes that say, when you're lowering me down in my grave, I want the people I did my group assignment with to lower me to my grave because they can let me down one more time. Yeah, that's exactly what I felt like as well. Okay. It was just this whole like one man show kind of thing, and I had to do everything by myself because everyone else was so not helpful, and they were actually quite useless. So it was irritating, but I had to do what I had to do. So when I was dealing with all of that, I had to deal with, getting food for people. I had to deal with making sure everything was running smoothly. There were so many different things that were on my head. And I realized after a while, while I was trying to do all these multiple things like make invites and emails, make sure people have confirmed and make sure people have made the payments and whatnot. When I was the one who was taking care of everything, at one point actually lost track, and I couldn't keep up with everything that was happening because it was so confusing for me as well. So there are things like that happens when you multitask, and that's exactly why you should sort of slow down on it. That's why you shouldn't multitask as well. Now, like I said, the pandemic has in fact sort of normalized it. They've romanticized it as well and glorified the fact that you can multitask. And even, these advertisements that are there which promote multitasking are in fact quite bad, because these advertisements are all like, oh, you know what, you're amazing, and they say this and they say that, and while congratulating you on your multitasking abilities, they also say, yay, you can treat yourself to a new phone so you can do even more of that. So that's the irony behind it. While you are being congratulated for being able to multitask, they're also giving you products, they're advertising products that you can use to multitask even more with, right? So it's a bit ironic, it's a bit hypocritical as well, because people are struggling, people are suffering so much, but even in the middle of a pandemic, when people are struggling mentally and physically, we're still required to do that work. So because of that, obviously things do get hard, things do get sometimes it's a bit of a struggle as well. Now the thing is, even though all of this exists, sometimes multitasking can feel really good, and there's often this moment of manic adrenal exaltation that is which basically makes you glorify yourself for your ability to manage all these tasks simultaneously. So that obviously exists as well, and it can get very very stressful. It can lead you to lose focus, it can lead you to have anxiety, depression as well. But make sure you stay tuned, because we will continue this conversation in a little bit after this break. So until then, make sure you stay tuned.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends, and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
You're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that would improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It'll make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there. You're quite right.
I've been doing this for quite some time. Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
base camp, yeah.
At least.
Which we had a cycle there.
Oh.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise, and I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. Now, like I said, I'm very, very excited to be here because we do have a lot of interesting things to talk about, especially when it comes to multitasking in the middle of a pandemic, something that all of us have done as well. It's very, very important to have this conversation. So that's why we're talking about it. So make sure you stay tuned. But before we head back into this conversation, I want to quickly remind you that you can, in fact, follow us on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And you can always make sure you're updated and you're informed about everything that's happening right here in the United Kingdom, but also all around the world as well. So make sure you do that. And also make sure to download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So you can download it on your iOS device and your Android device as well. So make sure you do that because that will be absolutely amazing, which means you can join this conversation in basically anywhere in the world. Okay, any time of the day, anywhere in the world, you can join this conversation. You can be a part of this conversation, and don't forget to text me on 078 so you can share your thoughts, your opinions, your questions, whatever it is, because we care about your opinions. We want to know what you're thinking. We would love to hear what you're thinking, and we would want everyone else who's listening in to know about it as well. So make sure you do that, because right now we're actually going to get back into our conversation on multitasking and why exactly it is so detrimental to our health. So why exactly does multitasking have such a negative effect on us? Now, according to Dave Crenshaw, who's a business coach and author, and who's also the author of The Myth of Multitasking, the damage is actually caused by what he refers to as the switching cost. Now, what the switching cost is, or what it means, is the time you take to switch from one task and refocus on another. So apparently, you actually take a much longer time to accomplish things, make more mistakes, and it in fact even increases your stress. So when you're constantly switching between tasks, you take much longer to actually refocus on it and to realize or to even figure out that this is what you have to do. So this happens as well, and that's why it actually takes much more time for you to focus on something else. Now, something else that happens is obviously how it you tend to make more mistakes and you increase your stress as well. Look, like I said multiple times before, we're already in a very stressful environment right now. The pandemic, working from home, looking after our families, doing our household chores, and all the 101 other things that we do. Obviously, we're already in a stressful situation. So why exactly is it that we want to exert more pressure on ourselves, that we want to put ourselves in much more stressful situations than the ones that we're already going through? I constantly ask myself this question as well. Sometimes when you have so many different things happening, sometimes when there are so many different things that are going on in your life, I think you don't actually have a choice but you don't actually have a choice but to multitask, right? Because there are so many things happening in your life. You have to make sure everything is going according to plan. You have no choice but to multitask. Now, he also says that the habit of multitasking is extremely destructive, but admits that it is in fact quite difficult to combat because people are used to thinking that this is a good way to behave. So it all starts with that mindset you have. It all starts with the way you view it. If you view something bad as being good, then chances are everyone else is going to view it that way as well. So you're promoting this mindset, you're promoting this mentality that multitasking is good, that multitasking is basically the biggest talent you could ever have, and that if you can multitask, that means you're already successful in life. So one of the biggest issues when it comes to combating this mindset, when it comes to addressing this mentality, is obviously the fact that there is a lot of people who have normalized it and who actually think that multitasking is absolutely okay. right? Now, like I said, people think that it's a very, very good way to behave. And you've likely heard that multitasking is problematic, but new studies actually show that it kills your performance and will even damage your brain. So are you actually going to risk your performance, risk your brain cells at the basically to multitask? Would you do that? Because I definitely wouldn't. And the more I'm reading about it, the more I'm finding out about it, the more it's making me realize that I have been doing a lot of things wrong, especially when it comes to multitasking. And what's important is sometimes it's okay for you to realize that you're doing something wrong. It's okay for you to take a step back and make that decision, make that choice to not make that choice to actually take a step back and tell yourself, look, you're doing something you're wrong, you're doing something destructive, you're doing something that's bad. So take a step back, slow down, focus on one task at a time, right? Because when you try to do two things at once, your brain lacks the capacity to perform both tasks successfully. Now, research has also shown that in addition to slowing you down, multitasking actually lowers your IQ as well. So like I said earlier, also we were talking about how it lowers your IQ by 10 points if you're multitasking. Now, a study that was done by the University of London actually found that participants who multitasked during cognitive tasks experienced IQ score declines that were similar to what they'd expect if they had smoked up marijuana or they had stayed up all night. So it's that same amount of detrimental effect. It's those same negative impacts that you have when you're smoking up when you're doing drugs or when you've stayed up all night. So why is it that even while knowing all of this, even while understanding that it is in fact quite harmful, why is it that we still continue to multitask? Like I said, the very obvious answer to that question is the fact that you have no choice but to multitask because, like I said, you have to make sure you multitask, right? You don't have a choice when you're in this very when you have a very busy life, when you have a very stressful life, you have to actually multitask, right? So, like I said, now IQ actually, going back to this whole IQ claim that is there, IQ drops of IQ drops by 15 points for multitasking men lowered it basically, and it also basically lowered their scores to the average range of an 8-year-old child. So basically, if you multitask sometimes, your average, your IQ scores actually are goes down to the average range of an 8-year-old child. So when you're multitasking, you might as well be an 8-year-old child, because if you have to multitask, if you have to write that additional email while you're at a meeting, then you might as well give it to an 8-year-old child, because that is what it looks like. And the other thing is, if you're prone to multitasking, and this is clearly not a habit that you want to indulge in, it clearly slows you down and it decreases the quality of your work as well. So even if it doesn't cause brain damage, allowing yourself to multitask will actually fuel any existing difficulties that you have with concentration, organization, and attention to detail. So, if you're already someone who can't concentrate, if you're already someone who's not organized and who pays very little attention to detail, then chances are it's actually not really going to help you at all either. Okay, so when you're doing all of these, when you're multitasking, when you're doing all of these different things that you have to do, then you might as well not, because it actually affects your brain cells so much that you can't even focus. Your productivity drops, your performance drops, you become more stressed out, and you become much less focused, right? So it's just it's ultimately at the end of the day, it's just the way we perceive things, it's the way we see things, right? We have to sort of start seeing this in a negative light to sort of realize that it is in fact harmful, that it in fact has a lot of negative effects. And if that's the case, then why do we still keep continuing to multitask? Why is it still something that is praised and glorified and considered heroic? Because it's actually not. It reduces your brain density, it drops down your IQ, it drops down your performance, it makes you less productive, it makes you more prone to anxiety and depression. But we still, it's almost as if we're purposely putting ourselves in this situation, or we're intentionally creating it for ourselves, and then we do have to obviously feel the impact of it, and then we're just like, oh, this happened to me, I now have to just get on with it. Like that's just what it is. We're putting ourselves in this situation. Now apparently multitasking in meetings and other social settings actually indicates low self and social awareness. And basically it also shows that your emotional intelligence skills are low as well. Now, when it comes to self and social awareness and emotional intelligence, those two are actually skills that are critical to success at work. So, obviously, if you're multitasking and you're not really focusing, then the truth of the matter is you're not going to have that high of an emotional intelligence, or you're not actually going to be aware of yourself and, the environment around you as well. Especially because, right now, when it comes to jobs, you're supposed to be aware, you're supposed to be on alert, and you're supposed to understand everything that is happening. It's very very important that you start focusing on everything else that happens in your surrounding as well. So the crux of this is actually to urge you, to actually make you aware that multitasking is something bad, and we should not endorse it, we should not indulge in it, and we should not think of it as something to be proud of, because it's causing a lot of impacts, especially in terms of mental and physical health. And it's causing a lot of us to lose focus, it's causing a lot of us to be stressed out as well. And the truth of the matter is, it's not like we want any more stress in addition to the stress that we're already going through because of the pandemic, right? So because of that, it's very very important for you to understand and keep in mind that multitasking is not helpful, and that we need to make sure we take the correct steps. Now at the same time, while there are so many different negative impacts, detrimental impacts of multitasking, there's also obviously things that you can do to limit the damage, because like Newton's law, each and every action has an equal and opposite reaction. While something happens, there will also obviously be solutions to that problem. It just means that we have to consistently work on the solutions, we have to make sure we make the correct decisions to make sure that we get better. So if we have a problem, obviously if you're sick, you take medicine, right? And that's the same when it applies to multitasking as well. If you are, if you're struggling because of it, then you should take these necessary steps and solutions to actually make sure that you can solve your problem of multitasking, and make sure that you have a much more happier, healthier life as well. Now make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few minutes to actually talk to you about the things that you can do to focus better and to make sure that you don't multitask. But until then, make sure you stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now, we were talking about multitasking, a very important conversation that we were all having. So, I'm very, very excited to get back into that because we still have a bit more left to discuss in terms of what you can actually do to deal with multitasking, in terms of what you can do to make sure that you don't keep multitasking, and to make sure that you are, you're very healthy and that you don't do things that are unhealthy and has detrimental impacts on you. So, because right here at Relax Radio, we care about you, we value you, we want you to be healthy, we want you to be fit, and we want to know your opinions as well. So make sure you text me on 07852473473, and you can actually be a part of this conversation because obviously, like I said, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. I would love to hear everything that you want to share with us as well. So make sure you do that. And I also want to quickly remind you that you can, in fact, follow us on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And while you're at it, make sure that you follow us because you can always make sure you're updated. You can make sure you know about everything that's happening as well to keep you basically to make sure that you know about everything that happens right here in the United Kingdom, but also all around the world as well. So make sure you do that because it's definitely going to help you to be aware in these, difficult times when we have to actually be aware of everything that is happening in the world. So make sure you do that. Now also make sure to follow or rather download our app from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, because that way you can actually make sure that you can be a part of this conversation, that you can join live into this conversation whatever time that you want. Okay, so make sure you do that because I would absolutely love to make sure that you're a part of this conversation as well. Now, like I said, there are many rather there are many negative impacts of multitasking. So what exactly can we do to actually make sure that we're better, to make sure we can limit the damage that is caused by multitasking? Now obviously it all starts with self-acceptance. The number one thing is self-acceptance. You have to sort of be at peace with the fact that there are only 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week, and there's only one of you, right? That's what Dave Crenshaw says, and you have to understand your limitation and be okay with that. I think self acceptance is something that we all have problems with, right? We all struggle to accept the fact that we're not machines. We can't constantly be working, we can't constantly be fulfilling all these tasks that we have to do in all 24 hours of the day. We're human, we need to sleep, we need to eat, we need to rest a little bit, we need to rejuvenate ourselves to keep doing the work that we have to do. Because we all know when you're constantly working, when you overwork, then you do get burnt out, you do get sick, and you don't need research to do that, because obviously we've either all of us have been in that situation, or we know someone who has been in that situation, and we know how much it has affected them. So self acceptance is something that a lot of us struggle with, regardless of whether it's accepting the fact that you're not some robot that can be productive all 24 hours of the day, or accepting the fact that sometimes you might not fit into the societal standards, and that's completely okay. Whatever it is, with regard to acceptance, whatever it is with regard to accepting yourselves, a lot of us struggle with self acceptance. So like Dave Crenshaw says, you need to come to terms, and you have to be at peace with the fact that you can't work all 24 hours of the day. You're human, and there's only so much that you can also put in as well. And he also advises us to do something which is called switch busters, which is basically to limit the temptation to multitask. Now, these switch busters actually include things like turning off your phone at appropriate times. So, for example, in meetings, or turning off your monitor when you're on the phone, and scheduling recurring appointments with people who consistently interrupt you, so they keep any questions to themselves until that time. Right now, oh my gosh, I can totally understand. We've all come across people who have 100 different questions for you while you're in the middle of something important. And sometimes it gets really annoying. For me personally, I get so annoyed because sometimes I try to focus as much as possible and people disturb me, and it annoys me so much. And sometimes the questions they ask are like really simple, very obvious, common sense questions. And I'm like, how can you not figure that out by yourself? Like, what are you, a child? I once work with someone who would ask like 50 different questions about a simple task. Like if I asked her to fill the water bottle, she would have like 50 different questions about it, like, oh, which one is your water bottle, what kind of water do you want, do I fill it now, do I fill it later? And those kind of people are annoying, but the truth of the matter is we have to deal with people like that. We don't have a choice. We come across a lot of people like that in our in our day-to-day routine. So obviously we have to sort of find ways to deal with that. And the best way to deal with that is obviously to give them a specific time, recurring appointments that they can ask all of these questions that they have to ask you. Now that way you can actually make sure that they don't call you every time. They don't call you at the most ridiculous times of the day, especially when you're in the middle of something, and interrupt you. So obviously that's very very important, so make sure you do that. And also make sure to turn off your other distractions, like your phone if you're on your computer, or your computer if you're on the phone. Never ever have multiple technological devices at the same time, because that really really affects your productivity. Right now, he also suggests having dedicated time to deal with different tasks, such as 1 hour slot every morning to sort through email. Now, if you followed us on TikTok, you would have recently seen there was a TikTok about time management. Now, you can actually use those tasks to help you stay, productive, and also to make sure that you don't multitask, right? Because all those tasks, all those, different tips that are there on that time, on that time management video can actually help you be more organized and help you keep track of all the different things that you do, that you need to do rather, instead of putting unnecessary pressure on yourself to achieve all of these tasks within a certain time period, and to make life very very hard for you. So have specific time slots to do specific things, and try to do it during that time slot. Now, another person called, or another person who's very qualified when it comes to multitasking, and who knows a lot when it comes to multitasking, is actually someone called Glenn Wilson, right? And he says don't multitask at all wherever possible. He says if you're doing something very important, he suggests that it would be better to shut down all channels of communication, so you can concentrate fully. And that's very important, because we tend to lose focus, we tend to lose concentration when we're doing important tasks, and that obviously results in us getting scolded, or us being shouted at. And obviously no one actually wants that kind of negativity early in the morning, or no one actually wants to deal with that kind of thing early in the morning at work, right? I mean, come on, it's not like you want to get scolded. Like, come on, we all love having a good day at work where we don't get scolded from a boss, right? So make sure you do that. And the thing though is, obviously things like that might not be realistic or possible when your office is frantic, when you have so much of work to do. But the truth is, most of us actually overload ourselves to some point or some extent when we don't strictly need to. Now, sometimes we don't really need to stress ourselves out so much. We don't need to overload ourselves so much, but we still do it anyway. And what we need to do is actually to manage our time a bit better, to focus on one thing at a time if possible, right? So as much as you can, try to multitask as little as you can. Okay, make sure you keep multitasking to the minimum, that you allocate certain time periods to do certain tasks, and make sure you batch these tasks up as well. So if it's things like writing emails, reading emails, well, you can do all of that. You can do all of that for an hour in the morning, as and you can finish up all of that you need to do. And obviously something to think about before you get cracking on your next move on computer chess, right? So definitely think about that before you start playing games on your computer, or you're watching videos or whatever. It's okay to take breaks, but don't watch videos and stuff in the middle of doing work. It's very distracting, and it also makes you lose focus. Now make sure you stay tuned, because I will be back in a little bit to talk to you about the pros and cons of overthinking. something that I do a lot, something that you do a lot as well. So I know we can all relate to that, but make sure you stay tuned because I'll be back to talk about all of that.